Hello everybody and welcome to the first video in a series on the subject of solicitors' accounts for the SQE. Now this is an introductory video like all of the others, and so what we will do is take an introduction to the subject of this particular study, and we will then start to look at the SQE specification, look at the kinds of things we're going to be examining in this series of videos on solicitors' accounts, and then finish by looking at some of the citations and further readings associated with this course. Now, solicitors' accounts, of course, is one of those modules that we have to do for the SQE, and specifically what we will do is outline the scope of the content that students are required to know for this particular module, and by extension, therefore, looking at the scope of this series of videos, the kinds of things that this series of videos is going to be covering. Now, for a lot of people, solicitors' accounts tend to fill law students with dread, and that's probably because it has the words accounts in it. And it is essentially an accounting module, but it is not the most advanced accounting module you'll ever do in your life, or if it's not accounting in the really highly rigorously mathematical sense. You do have to do some accounting practices and some basic ideas of accounting, but for the most part, you're going to be familiarizing yourself with the accounts rules established by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the SRA. So the SQE specification outlines and delineates 4 core topics that students are required to apply relevant core principles of double entry bookkeeping and the SRA accounts rules appropriately and effectively at the level of a competent newly qualified solicitor in practice to realistic client-based and ethical problems. So we are applying, essentially, the SRA accounts rules appropriately and effectively. So essentially, you will be becoming very, very familiar with these SRA accounting rules as we go throughout these videos. And you will also become very familiar with the double entry bookkeeping system, which sounds very, very complicated and sounds very, very difficult, especially if you're, like I said, someone who has just come from law as an undergraduate, and so you've never had to do maths really in law school, but it's not as difficult, it's not as complicated as you might think. Double entry bookkeeping is the first thing you would learn in any accounting course, whether that be A-level all the way up to university level accounting. So just bear that in mind. So the 4 topics that we're going to be looking at, or the main topics that we'll look at that are part of the SQE specification, firstly is transactions involving client money and money belonging to the authorized body, operation of ledgers and bank accounts and payments of interest, breaches of the SRA account rules, so you have to understand what those breaches actually are, as well as accounting entries required, so bills, obtaining and delivering of accountants' reports, as well as obligations regarding record keeping. So quite a few points that we need to look at in this series, not as much as you see in some of the other series and some of the other videos, but still quite a lot of information that we're going to have to get through. And we can take these 4 broad points on the SQE specification, and we can unpack them a little bit and find some other areas. We can derive a number of topics that we're going to study. So the first thing that we're going to look at, really before we even look at client money, we will look at taking a basic introduction to the double entry bookkeeping system, and we will use and do lots and lots and lots and lots of examples to really get you familiar with this particular mode of thinking and ideas relating to accounting and double entry bookkeeping. Essentially, as soon as you've sort of got your head around that part, then a lot of the other things do actually just fall into place. That's what I found when I was going through and familiarizing myself with this material over the last couple of years, essentially. So we'll then talk about client money. We will talk about the client account, the separation of money, the idea of interest. We'll talk about breaching of the SRA accounting rules. We'll talk about the operation of joint accounts and the client's own accounts, third-party managed accounts, obtaining and delivery of an accountant's reports, storage and retention of accounting records. Quite a lot to get through, but again, it's all a lot easier than a lot of people think. Like I said, people tend to dread the solicitors' accounts modules for these particular topics. The LPC had a very similar module that was called Accounting for Solicitors or Accounts for Solicitors. And again, it involved these different kinds of issues, but it's not as difficult as you might think. Now, in terms of the citations and sources, of course, the Kempton Solicitors Accounts textbook from the University of Law is your go-to when thinking about this material, in my opinion. But also, if you want to look again at Kempton's Accounts for Solicitors for the LPC, that might have in it some practice questions and some examples and maybe explain some topics and issues in a way that might be a bit easier for you to understand. But bear in mind, of course, that is not the SQE, okay? So there might be a lot of crossover in terms of their content, and you might find helpful some of their exam questions or maybe some of their examples specifically, but you have to just remember and keep in the back of your mind that that is not the SQE, that would be the LPC, which is obviously slightly different. There's also some other issues. I think that just having a very basic textbook on accounting and reporting, the UK accounting and reporting textbook, the Quick Start textbook from 2020, I found very, very helpful when preparing these materials, just because essentially solicitors' accounts is slightly different to ordinary accounting in some ways, but in other ways it's quite similar. In other ways, they're very similar topics. So if you want to familiarize yourself with accounting more generally, then you can do so through that. And then finally, the CAMP Solicitors and Accounting Rules from the Law Society is also beneficial and helpful to you. Now, in terms of any additional material, it should be noted that this is a very, very technical, very, very procedural module. It's not like criminal law or even wills and estates, where there's lots and lots of cases and lots of examples of case law. So there's going to be less extension material in terms of case law and diving deeper into other materials. But where there may be different cases that I might unpack and have a look at and illustrate for you, or other bits of extension materials, I will include them as always with all of the other videos in the citations and sources material at the end of the slide. All of this is also in the description of every single video and is also in the description of the playlist for this video. So there's lots of ways in which you can get access to this material. Furthermore, where there is an update in the textbooks, so if, for example, we go from the 4th edition to the 5th edition of the Solicitors Accounts module textbook, for example, I'll make that very clear as well in these videos, that you need to be using the most up-to-date textbook on this topic. And so that's basically it. These videos will be coming out over the next few weeks and months. As always, the first 6 or so videos will be free for people to get an idea of what material what these videos look like, and then the rest will be behind a membership for those who want to dive deeper. I hope everybody's enjoyed this video, and I hope to see everybody back in videos in the future.